It usually happens at night. You're lying in the dark, trying to sleep. The room is quiet. Nothing is happening. And then, without warning, your mind hands you something. Not a fear about tomorrow, something that already happened. A conversation from years ago. A joke that did not land. A look someone gave you that you never fully understood. Your mind plays it again. Then, somehow worse. You know the moment is over. You know it cannot be changed. And yet some part of your mind keeps returning to it, as if one more replay might reveal something important. An explanation, a warning, a different ending. Psychologists often call this rumination, the habit of returning to the same painful thought without reaching a real answer. The strange question is not why the mind remembers the past. Memory is supposed to do that. The stranger question is why certain moments refuse to become ordinary memories, why some experiences fade quietly away while others remain strangely alive. The mind may not be malfunctioning when it does this. It may be trying to solve a problem that no longer has a solution. Human attention is naturally drawn toward things that feel unfinished, uncertain, or threatening. When something goes wrong socially, the mind marks it as important, as if the file remains open, not because the mind enjoys suffering, but because unresolved moments may contain useful information. What happened? What did I miss? How do I avoid this again? For many problems, this process works. You analyze a mistake, you learn something, but some experiences do not respond to analysis in the same way. A conversation cannot be repeated. A humiliating moment cannot be edited. A younger version of you cannot walk back into the room and choose better words. And yet the mind often treats these memories like puzzles with perfect solutions. It reorders the details, imagines better responses, creates better sentences you could have said. The replay creates the feeling of movement, but often nothing is actually moving. The mind is searching for closure inside an event that is already complete. And because replay cannot change the original moment, the search can continue far longer than it should. Not every mistake returns at 3 in the morning. You probably do not lose sleep over dropping a spoon in the kitchen, but say the wrong thing in front of people and the memory can remain for years. Speak too confidently. Reveal something too personal. Try to be funny and hear silence. The mind treats these moments differently. Research suggests that social pain and physical pain involve some overlapping brain systems. Embarrassment is not the same as physical injury, but the overlap may help explain why rejection and humiliation can feel so real in the body. The tight chest, the heat in the face, the urge to disappear. For most of human history, belonging was connected to survival. Rejection from a group could carry serious consequences. Modern embarrassment is usually not dangerous, but the mind does not always respond according to modern logic. It may still treat signs of rejection as important warnings. Imagine a familiar scene. You are with people you want to impress. You say something, and the room does not respond the way you expected. Someone looks down. Someone gives a polite smile that is not quite real. There's a small pause. Then the conversation moves on. Outwardly, almost nothing happened, but something registered, and later, your mind returns to that exact moment, not to the whole evening. Just the look, the pause, the smile that was not quite a smile. The memory stands out because it contains uncertainty. You do not know exactly what they thought, and uncertainty gives the mind room to create its own explanation, usually not a generous one. The gap between how you hope to be seen and how you fear you were seen becomes the center of the memory. The replay may be an attempt at protection, but protection can continue long after it stops being useful. A smoke alarm is designed to warn you about fire, but if it keeps ringing after the smoke is gone, the warning itself becomes the problem. At some point, you notice the loop, and you try to stop it. Forget it. Think about something else, but the instruction does not work. In 1987, psychologist Daniel Wegner conducted a famous experiment involving a white bear. Participants were told to think about anything they wanted except a white bear. The task sounded simple, but people found it surprisingly difficult. The forbidden thought kept returning, and after trying to suppress it, it often returned even more strongly. This became known as the ironic effect of thought suppression. To avoid a thought, the mind has to keep checking whether the thought is present, but checking for the thought keeps it active. Part of the mind says, "Do not think about it." Another part keeps asking, "Am I thinking about it now?" The same thing can happen with an embarrassing memory. You tell yourself not to replay it, but your attention quietly searches for it anyway. And there it is again. The more forcefully you try to remove the thought, the more important it can begin to feel. This creates a second problem. Now you are not only embarrassed by the original memory, you are frustrated that you are still thinking about it. The mind begins to judge itself. Why am I still doing this? Why can I not let it go? What is wrong with me? The original memory becomes attached to a second layer of pain. Not just the embarrassment of what happened, but the shame of still caring. Not every return to the past is harmful. Sometimes looking back helps us understand ourselves, but repetitive thinking can move in very different directions. One kind circles endlessly. Why am I always like this? Why do I ruin everything? These questions may sound like attempts to understand, but they are usually too broad to answer. So the mind keeps searching without knowing what it is searching for. There is another way to look back. It begins with more specific questions. What exactly made that moment difficult? Why did their reaction matter so much to me? Both ways return to the same memory, but they do not lead the mind in the same direction. One keeps the mind trapped inside judgment. The other gives it something concrete to examine. Understanding does not always erase a memory, but a clearer question can turn endless replay into reflection, and reflection can have an end point. You may realize that you misread the situation. You may accept that you acted badly. You may decide there is nothing useful left to discover. Or you may understand that what still hurts is not the event itself, but what it seemed to say about you. The memory becomes information rather than evidence in an endless trial. There is a danger here. It is tempting to believe that every returning memory contains a hidden message, that if you think about it long enough, some deeper truth will appear. But not every mental loop is meaningful. Sometimes a loop is simply a loop. A thought becomes familiar because it has been repeated, not because it contains a secret, and endlessly searching for hidden meaning can become another form of rumination. Still, some memories may point towards something unfinished. Perhaps you judge your past self by standards you only learned later. Perhaps one awkward moment became evidence for your entire personality. Perhaps the memory touches something you deeply value: respect, competence, acceptance, control. This does not mean every painful thought should be followed, but it may explain why certain memories continue returning. Instead of trying to force the memory away, it can be more useful to ask whether it is showing you anything new, or whether you are simply repeating the same judgment in different words. Because repetition is not proof. A thought can feel important simply because it has returned so many times. So the next time your mind hands you something at 3 in the morning, some moment from years ago that you thought you had left behind, You may notice the old instinct to push it away, or the opposite instinct to enter the memory completely and analyze every detail again. But there may be another possibility: to pause before doing either, to ask whether the thought is actually moving anywhere, whether it is revealing something new, or only asking you to relive the same moment again. The mind often confuses repetition with resolution. It assumes that if a question still hurts, it must not have been answered. But some questions do not end because we solve them. They end because we recognize their limits. The past cannot be corrected from the present. The room cannot be entered again. The pause cannot be removed. And perhaps uncertainty is part of what the mind finds hardest to accept. Not every moment will reveal exactly what it meant. Sometimes there is no final interpretation, only the fact that you were there, that you were imperfect, that others may have misunderstood you, that you may have misunderstood yourself, and that the moment ended anyway. Maybe the question is not why the memory returned. Maybe the question is whether returning to it is revealing something new or only repeating what you already know.